It was a chilly night when Officer Daniels heard the faint sound of crying as he patrolled an empty street. Following the noise, he discovered something that shook him to his core: a newborn baby, abandoned in a trash bin. With tears in his eyes and no time to waste, he wrapped the tiny infant in his jacket and rushed for help. That night, he not only saved a life, but also began a story that would unfold in ways no one could have predicted. Years later, a knock at his door would bring back memories of that moment, memories he thought had faded. What happened next left him speechless, proving that even the smallest acts of kindness can ripple through time in the most unexpected ways. Stay tuned as we unravel the incredible twists and turns of this life-changing encounter. That night had stayed with Officer Daniels, even years after it happened. He could still remember every detail: the desperate cries, the icy wind, the overwhelming feeling of heartbreak when he saw the tiny baby wrapped in nothing but an old towel. He never found out who left the child there or why, but he had done everything he could to make sure the baby was safe. The little girl, who the hospital staff named Lily, was placed in foster care. Daniels often wondered what became of her, but over time, life moved on, and the questions lingered unanswered. Then, one ordinary evening, years later, the knock at his door caught him off guard. Standing there was a young woman, nervous but determined, clutching a small, worn piece of paper. "Are you Officer Daniels?" she asked softly. The moment he said yes, her next words changed everything. Officer Daniels nodded, confused but curious. The young woman took a shaky breath, holding out the crumpled paper. "I've been searching for you for years. You saved my life." Her voice cracked as she fought back tears. Daniels froze, his heart pounding as the pieces started to come together. Was this Lily, the baby he had rescued all those years ago? He invited her inside, and as they sat down, her story began to unfold. Lily explained that growing up hadn't been easy. Though she was adopted by a loving family, questions about her past haunted her. She always wondered who had found her that night and why someone had abandoned her. It wasn't until she turned 18 that she discovered the truth. A social worker shared her adoption records, and buried within them was his name. That name had become her lifeline, leading her here. But there was more she needed to know, questions that even Officer Daniels wasn't sure he could answer. Why had she been left in the trash that night? Who had abandoned her? And as Daniels listened, he couldn't shake the feeling that the answers might reveal more than either of them were ready for. As Lily shared her story, Officer Daniels couldn't help but feel a mix of pride and unease. He was relieved to see the tiny baby he'd rescued had grown into such a strong, determined young woman. But her questions weighed heavily on him. He had no answers, only memories of that night, the chill in the air, the desperation in the baby's cries, and the overwhelming sense that someone had wanted her to disappear. "I've tried to find out who my birth parents are," Lily admitted, her voice trembling. "But every lead goes cold. I thought maybe you saw something that night, something that could help me." Daniels wished he had something to offer, but all he could remember was the haunting silence of the alley where she'd been left. Still, something about her determination stirred a memory, a small detail he'd nearly forgotten. That night, he'd noticed a shadowy figure disappearing down the street just as he approached the trash bin. It was too dark to see clearly, but now he couldn't shake the feeling that it mattered. Before Daniels could share this with Lily, his phone buzzed. A call from someone he hadn't spoken to in years. The voice on the other end was shaky and hesitant. "Daniels, it's about the baby you found. There's something you need to know." The cryptic message sent chills down his spine. Whatever this was, it wasn't over yet. Daniels gripped the phone tighter, his heart pounding as the voice on the other end continued. "I couldn't live with the guilt anymore. I know something about that night, but I wasn't sure if I should tell you." The caller was an old informant from his early days on the force, someone Daniels hadn't heard from in over a decade. His words were cryptic, but they carried a weight that made Daniels uneasy. "What do you know?" Daniels asked, his voice low and steady, though his mind raced. The informant hesitated, then finally said, "I saw who left the baby. It wasn't random, Daniels. It was deliberate, and I think it had to do with something bigger." The line went silent for a moment before the caller added, "I'll meet you tomorrow, but be careful. Not everyone wants the truth to come out." Daniels hung up, his thoughts spinning. He glanced at Lily, who sat across from him, her expression a mixture of hope and fear. Should he tell her about the call, or would it only complicate things further? That night, Daniels couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the caller's words in his head. Deliberate, bigger. What did that mean? And why would someone want to hide the truth about Lily's abandonment? The stakes were suddenly much higher, and Daniels realized this wasn't just about giving Lily closure. It was about uncovering a secret someone had worked hard to bury. The next day, Daniels met the informant in a dimly lit diner on the outskirts of town. Lily insisted on coming along, her determination unwavering. The man sitting in the corner booth looked older and more worn than Daniels remembered. He slid a folded piece of paper across the table without a word. Daniels unfolded it carefully, revealing an address and a name that sent a chill down his spine. "That's where it all started," the informant muttered. The baby wasn't abandoned randomly. Her mother, she didn't have a choice. She was trying to protect her. Lily's eyes widened. "Protect me? From what?" The man hesitated before finally saying, "Her father. He was dangerous. He was involved in something big, something criminal, and when your mother tried to leave, he threatened her. Leaving you, there was her only way to keep you safe. She thought someone would find you before it was too late." Daniels felt a mix of anger and heartbreak. All these years, the truth had been shrouded in fear and secrecy. But as he looked at Lily, he saw something more, a strength that couldn't be erased by the pain of her past. They decided to visit the address. When they arrived, the small, run-down house looked abandoned. But inside, they found an old hidden box filled with photographs, letters, and one final clue, a picture of Lily's mother holding her as a baby, along with a note that read, "*for my Lily, so you'll know I loved you." Asterisk. The twist came as they were leaving the house. A car pulled up, and out stepped a woman with Lily's same bright eyes. Her mother, alive after all these years. The reunion was bittersweet, filled with tears, explanations, and the realization that love had been the driving force behind everything. But as the sun set that evening, Daniels noticed something. A figure stood watching from a distance, the shadow of someone who wasn't ready to let the past stay buried. The story wasn't over yet. As the figure disappeared into the fading light, Officer Daniels stayed on high alert. But for now, Lily and her mother were safe. The emotional reunion brought answers that had been hidden for so long. Lily's mother explained everything, the danger she faced, the impossible choice she had to make, and how she had lived in hiding ever since, hoping one day Lily would find her way to safety. For Lily, the pain of abandonment was softened by the truth. She now understood that her mother's decision wasn't out of neglect, but out of love and protection. Officer Daniels, too, felt a sense of closure, knowing he had played a part in something bigger than himself. As they hugged goodbye, Daniels watched Lily and her mother walk away, finally starting a new chapter together. It was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope and love could prevail.